Hi, everybody, and welcome to our October ambassador briefing. I am very excited to have a special guest with us today. Joining us is Senator Joyce Elliot from Arkansas, who has been a real trailblazer when it comes to kidney-friendly legislation on the state level. And I will let her talk about her family's experience with kidney disease and how she's been successful putting forth kidney-friendly legislation over the years in very much a bipartisan fashion. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to Senator Joyce Elliot from Arkansas.
Thank you, Ben, and hi, everybody. I am excited about being here because I get to talk to new people and hear from other people around the country. And you can only be excited about this kind of news because you care about it and you know how important it is. Some of the news around kidney disease is something that we're really proud of and happy about the way things have turned out, but still there is so much to do. But I grew up in a family that has, on my mother's side, there is quite a bit of kidney disease that's in our family. And I think my grandmother, for instance, who died from kidney disease, didn't even know for the longest time what was happening to her. And she went ahead drinking her Cokes or her iced tea and probably eating all kind of things she would not have eaten had she known. And by the time we found out, that was quite some time ago, by the time we found out what it was, she was practically into kidney failure. She was a very calm and compassionate woman. And it was not long after she got the disease that we knew she was probably not going to last. And at that time, I was living out of state in Minnesota, and I came home to see her for fear that I would not get to see her before she passed away if I did not come then. But when I saw her, I would just never forget what she looked like and what the disease had done to her body, how it had changed her color, and how it had taken that bright shine out of her eyes. Although she did everything she could to try to keep it looking as if, things were fine. But she passed away, and then after she had passed away, I just thought, I was a young woman then. I was maybe 30, 31. I just thought perhaps, there must be a better way to handle these kind of things, a better way for people to get health care. I was in no position to do it myself. I was a school teacher, but very, very involved in politics and policy and pushing about trying to change things through policy itself. So from the time I was a kid, I decided I was going to run for office. I have never been one of those persons who's ashamed to say I'm a politician. I think if you're a politician, you shouldn't be ashamed to say it if you are doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And so all those years leading up to the time that I ran for office, which by that time I think I was 47 when I ran for office. And lo and behold, in the meantime, my younger sister, she and I were very close. My youngest sister inherited and got that same kind of kidney disease that my mother had gotten, and she died at age 50. But as it turned out, she had another 10 years on her life because when we learned that she had kidney disease, we are a big family. There are 7 kids in my family, and we were so lucky. All of us got tested, and in one way or another, all of us was a pretty good fit. That was just practically unheard of. But so my brothers and sisters and I had to sit down and have a meeting since we'd all been tested and decide, okay, who among us, how lucky are we that we have these options about who can donate if we choose to. So we had the meeting, and they all decided, because it wouldn't be them, they all decided that because I was the one with the healthiest habits, I was a runner, I ate right, and all of that, Joyce, you should be the one who is the donor to Gloria, who's my sister. And I said immediately, well, I don't know if those are good enough reasons or not. If another one of you could make the donation, but then I think it was my brother or somebody said, well, you don't smoke and I smoke, something along that line. But the bottom line was, as it turned out, I was the one who made the donation to my sister, and it was quite an experience, going through all of the testing and so forth and making sure about everything. And that was the year, though, that I had decided to run for the legislature. And I ended up, but that was a year, it was 2000, a year that would just stick in my mind forever for all the other things that were going on. And the commitment I had to have for continuing my race for the legislature. At the same time, I was preparing to donate a kidney to my sister. And so the doctors had us on standby and waited until everything was exactly right with her, because things were fine with me. And as it turned out, I ended up in a runoff at the time, close to the time that I had donated the kidney. So that summer, when the runoff was happening, we went to the hospital and everything went swimmingly. And what I want people to know is that it almost always does go swimmingly during that process of what we call the transfer and that donor, that organ to the other person. The thing that surprised me so much after we were there, I looked up and my sister standing in my room, and I was still in the bed, not doing nearly as well as she was as far as recovery was concerned, but doing just fine. But I forgot all about the fact that I was still in the bed, and not only was my sister standing there, but the doctor was there, and the nurse, and they were reporting to me the kidney was working just fine that quickly, and that she had actually been able to just, go to the bathroom and urinate and so forth. And she walked back to her room because the doctor said, it's time for you to go back. But as it turned out, I had to have, because of the way my kidney was located, I'd had to have a pretty major surgery, just in terms of an incision, not anything other than that, so that I was as mobile as she was. But it didn't take that long before I was. And things went well. But I still had this campaign I was trying to run because I wanted to get into office, because there were things I wanted to do, and address issues of kidney disease was one of them. So I had to cut my campaigning time short, but I would go out by day and campaign in the morning, and then not in the, because this was the summertime, and then go back out again in the afternoon and campaign. And that way I didn't overtax my body. So what people need to think about who are considering or even in a position, to be a donor, just know it doesn't just change your life or take away any of your life. This idea about it being a life-giving force is something that will just change your life as much as anybody else, for having the ability to extend somebody's life, or to just give them an opportunity to live in a way that they've been used to, and not have all the issues of dealing with dialysis and everything. And she lived a terrific life. Like I said, almost another 11 years after that, was able to go back to teaching and do all the things that she wanted to do. And her kids, of course, were so afraid, because she taught elementary school. But it was a great lesson she could impart to her kids. When it came to the students I was teaching high school kids. And when I told them I was going to donate a kidney to my sister, they just sat there and looked at me in disbelief. And what I realized was they thought that I loved my sister so much, I was giving up an organ that was going to cause me to just die. Their faces were just ashened. And I said, wait, and I recognized that they were misinterpreting all of this. I said, wait, this doesn't mean, and then a girl raised her hand and said, are you gonna die? And I said, no, it's not like that at all. As a matter of fact, my sister is gonna get to live a high quality life because of that. But out of that, these were 16 and 17-year-olds, probably a few 18-year-olds. We had this wonderful discussion in that class of those students that they could lead there and be ambassadors themselves, because they learned through my experience as a teacher and through my sharing that experience when I went back to teach, because I had to go back to teach. That was in summertime, to go back to teach in the fall. And I still had a little bit of recovery I needed to do because of the incision. And the doctor had said I needed to not, I was a very active teacher, I was very, and so I said to my students, it is your responsibility to make sure I don't get too active and I don't do things that as I normally do, which they were so happy to do, to get to tell the teacher what to do. But as all of that worked out, and the rest of my family was happy because we actually had our sister back, the way she was before she had to go through all of this. So yeah, I had a runoff in that race, and I won. And one of the first things I did when I got to the legislature was explore what can we do about helping families and helping the person who actually has the disease. And so I worked with folks in the legislature, and we got some legislation passed. What we were trying to get passed was that insurance companies, and this was 2001, that insurance companies would pay for sick leave, or that if you had sick leave with where you worked, you could use that sick leave as a part of your recovery. And we weren't able to get that done to that extent, but we were able to pass legislation to start with that if you are a state employee, then you would have the ability to take leave if you were a donor, hoping that would incentivize some people to think about being a donor if they knew they were not going to lose time at work or not lose salary. And we already had a commission that was created sometime before that allowed for, called the Kidney Foundation Commission, I think is what it was called, that allowed for some services, so to help people with expenses and so forth. And since that time, we've been able to bring just create an atmosphere of almost, it's common to talk about and think about and try to help out with issues of kidney disease in the legislature. It is really, really powerful to have somebody there who's experienced this and knows what they're talking about. So when we have worked at other legislation, and some of it is just all about ways of just giving people options about how they can get services, and making sure that commission is set up to tell them how they can do it. But I want to tell you, so I don't talk the whole time. There was another legislator at the time that I was in office as well. Oh, somebody is at my door. This is fun. But give me just a second. I'm so sorry.
Happens to everybody, so hopefully she'll be back in a second.
Okay, my front door is not very far, but her name is Linda Tyler. And as it turned out, she had a daughter that she donated a kidney to. So we were kind of just, we had our own little committee, our own little caucus, the two of us we were the only ones in the legislature at the time and we still are as far as I know, who were actual donors. But it just made such a difference when we could talk to legislators and they could just look at you and see that you are just a normal person, and how much it matters that you're not talking to some stranger. And then in my colleague in the Senate, this happened maybe 2 years ago. My colleague in the Senate, Senator Jim Hendren, his wife decided that she was going to be a donor. And it just, from something she had seen on TV, I think, and something in her just pulled her to be a donor. So we thought, well, this is good. Jim decided that he was going to do a resolution to keep bringing light to what's happening, with kidney disease and how folks can be helpful, particularly as a donor. So he did not know about my having been a donor at the time, and he was going to do a resolution, just to lift up that his wife was doing this wonderful thing, which was great. And he and I got to talking, and he said, "Somebody told me you were a donor. Is that true?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it is." So, and the good thing about this was so bipartisan, because he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and we still find ways to work together. And so he did this twin kind of resolution to bring some more light to what was going on. And that got a lot of press and a lot of people talking about. We have a senator who is a kidney donor. We have another senator whose wife is a kidney donor. And I think, that was just one of the biggest highlights of just bringing to the fore how important it is for people to consider being a donor, and how important it is for people to be an ambassador, whether or not, like Tammy Hendren, who had no connection to this other than, here's a person and I think I can help. And she did. So we have introduced some other legislation we haven't gotten passed, but the thing I want to leave you with is how I think, the atmosphere in our legislature and the caring that's been created by the years of continuing to talk about and lift up and let people understand this, that we can all help with. I would participate in the kidney walk, so to speak, of whatever we were doing, where I could show up and be an ambassador. I was always been glad to do that. But more than anything else, the extended time we got to have with our sister was the best of everything I've ever done.
And I first came across your story when it came out about Senator Hendren's wife donating, and he said, he wants to donate at some point as well. And then, dealing with elected officials, both at the federal and state level, I've used Arkansas as an example of how bipartisan support can happen, and how really kidney legislation should be nonpartisan, because it's really helping folks. And we always talk about how kidney disease affects people from every walk of life. It doesn't discriminate, but people of color are overrepresented in kidney disease because of social concerns, because of lack of access to care and things like that. But everyone is affected. And I also tell people, as an example, my brother lives in Los Angeles, and one time we were walking either Rodeo Drive or one of the other streets that has all the expensive stores, and there was a dialysis clinic there too.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
People in Hollywood get kidney disease as well. So it shows that literally on a street that has some of the most expensive stores in the country, that there's a dialysis clinic right there as well.
Ben, I've had to just kind of talk people down from thinking that you get kidney disease just because you did something wrong, and that's not necessarily the case at all.
No.
I mean, sometimes other things will lead to it. You don't have good health options sometimes, and that can help lead to it. But like the people you just mentioned, it sometimes is something that just happens, and you just have to figure out a way to deal with it. So the fact that we've created an atmosphere, I think, in Arkansas in the legislature of bipartisanship, going forward, I think that's going to make a big difference in what we're going to be able to do. And I'm sorry to say I'm going to be term limited at the end of 2022, but I will certainly still be helping, from the outside. So.
Well, we've been using you as an example, so we're glad to. Actually, I see Anthony Robinson has raised his hand, so I think he has a question. Yeah. Anthony, you can go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn my video on. This is actually Anthony's wife, my video.
Hi, Anthony's wife.
And Anthony is here too. He's just, we can't sit in the same spot. He's saying hello, everyone.
Hey.
So yeah, just interestingly, I think maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the EGFR for African Americans is no longer different for other folk, and I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Just speaking about disparities, and just wondering if you had any experience with that, sharing information about that, and how's that in your state? And then the second question is, we have some rural areas in Oregon where dialysis clinics have shut down and people don't have options. And some of these people are having to travel 2 or 3 hours. And what any experience in your state on how do we advocate for that, for better access to care? And if you've had any experience with that.
I have. As a matter of fact, I worked quite a bit with, there is a task force on outcomes that, the differentiation outcomes for different populations. And one of the things I see the data every year, a comprehensive report on, depending on what the issues are, disease it is and so forth. And when COVID hit, getting to the dialysis was a big deal because not everything was just moving the way it was. And it's not legislative, but it's something that's really informed us. I had a lot of constituents that I tried to get in that first cohort of people, to get the COVID vaccination because of the pre-existing conditions. And for some of them, I was successful in doing so, and others not. But I realized, rather than just taking that as a given, if you're on dialysis, you are at risk. I don't know what the questions had to be, but that's something that I think we need to add to our reports, thinking about pandemics and thinking more thoughtfully about when something happens out of the ordinary, how we are going to lift up the folks who need that. But our reports we get every year with the disparate impact, most definitely in the rural areas, it's a problem that I think we probably may be successful at addressing as we go along, because one of the things that people have realized, it has been thought of so much as this is a disease that affects a lot more Black people, but that's true disproportionately. But I think we saw and understood more about how it's affecting everybody. So I think unfortunately, the pandemic, but in a way good, that's something that's going to inform how we react differently to a lot of the disparate impacts, because COVID didn't discriminate. And so now that's going to make us think about things more, because we get these reports and we haven't done as well as we should in responding to them. But I definitely think that moving forward, we will be able to do that. For some of the disparate impacts, and this is one of them, the fact that I'm an African-American person of color has been helpful in my being able to talk to people of color about, will you please be a donor? I'm not asking you to give up your life right now. And that's what a lot of people think. And so we have an open field, I think, Ms. Robinson, of things that we are probably now being do that we hadn't had the momentum to get done now. So I think going forward, this is going to be very helpful to us. And the fact that if we can get Democrats and Republicans continuing to, think about this together, it's going to be helpful as well.
So does anyone else have any questions? You can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat. You can just ask yourself and unmute yourself.
Is everybody on here a volunteer? Is that?
Yep, everyone here are different volunteers for us across the country.
Well, I sure want to thank you for that, and I know you're being advocates and working with your legislators, but I think that is the major place we need to get some traction. It's helpful at the local level, but the big thing is changing policies. I think at that state level is really, really important. Yeah.
Sure. Senator Elliot, I have a question for you. And how did you work with educating your colleagues that maybe were not familiar with kidney disease? Because we've done on the federal level, as of today, we've done 90 in-district phone call conference calls with the staff members of Congress in the local offices, and there's it's all ends of the spectrum as to how much they know about
Mhm,
kidney disease legislation. You know, some folks have been donors themselves.
mhm,
People have
mhm,
had family members who have kidney disease, and others just know kidney disease
mhm.
exists. And so, how have you worked to educate and to let people know about, you know, what really is kidney disease?
Yes, I think when we introduced that first legislation where we were trying to get leave time for people, who might be involved in this process, um, that was one of the biggest times of educating people. And it really was just talking to them um, from relationships I'd already formed. Because as a legislator, and that's another thing about being African American as well. We were talking about kidney diseases disproportionately affecting African Americans. That same thing is true when you're in the legislature, for example, and you are not a part of the majority culture. You have to work harder to create relationships and so forth. And the fact that I was working to create relationships just to get any legislation passed. Um, then when I got ready to talk to people about kidney disease, I mean, they actually listened. And what I was doing, kind of like what I would do in the classroom, if there's a student that's not doing what you should do, the best ambassador you can have is another student. So I kind of employed that process of bit by bit, talking to people I knew who had influence to be helpful. And that person would talk to another person. Or in a situation, like if I'm presenting something, it is always important to have informed 2 or 3 people enough that you can get an amen, is what I call it, or you can get somebody to ask the right questions to get things out. But and beyond that, I just had private conversations with people. And we have the Legislative Black Caucus, and we have a retreat every year. And in that retreat, we've talked, about what kidney disease means and what it's doing to, as part of our presentations, what it's doing to the populations. Because sometimes it's not just the African American legislators who are there; it's others who will come as well, depending on what part of the state we're in. And I have shared information that I've gotten, like, here's and I've done resolutions every year when it's, we need to highlight, something is happening. Um, and I've just taken every opportunity I can, even on social media to talk about it, because people get their information so many different ways.
Sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll give everyone one last chance to ask the senator any questions. If not, then I will give Senator Elliott a hearty thank you on behalf of the American Kidney Fund and our ambassadors here for helping us and shedding some light on your personal story and how it works to get the kidney legislation through the State House. So
Yeah.
thank you very much,
right.
and really appreciate all your time and effort with us today.
Well, I am happy to do it. And thank you all so much for what you're doing. And just no matter how hard it gets, just keep pushing them. They need to be pushed. You are doing your jobs. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.